Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So welcome to Lewiston, the second largest city in Maine, but the city with the biggest heart, and we are here for a budget workshop. And I will turn it over to you, Heather, sorry.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council. Based upon information that was kind of vetted last Thursday, I emailed out the packet that is also on your place setting. Some of the highlights of what has changed. If you look down to starting with line number 35, we have added back the employee appreciation event. We have funded 36 through 42. Yeah, 42. Those are items that, looking through and kind of sitting down with all the department heads, which I greatly appreciate their response. These are some items that can be moved to fund balance, so that takes them out of the budget and places them as a fund balance option. And then essentially lines 43 through 45 reflect some further adjustments to some of those accounts. And then we get down to the positions that we had discussed. So you still have the city clerk's position at a July 1st start date. You have the fire inspector's position at an October 1st start date. You have one patrol officer's position with a December 1st start date. You have the 25% of the 4th school resource officer. You have the senior accountant at a January 1st start date. You have the mechanic in the municipal garage at a January 1st start date. And then you have an assistant fire chief with a January 1st start date. At that point, it takes the tax rate to $29.55, excluding the additional school revenue sharing and including the proposed school committee school budget increase.
So on the assistant fire chief position, you've got the rebudget and filled 1-1. Is the adjusted amount because we're filling it later?
Correct.
Great, thank you.
So if you look on the third sheet, you see how that tax rate is calculated. And again, that is based upon the school's 16-cent tax rate. It includes all the adjustments I just reviewed with a city 68-cent tax rate increase and the county with a 4-cent tax rate increase. The fourth page, the only difference between the third and the fourth page is the impact of the additional $725,000 worth of state revenue sharing. So that brings the tax rate down from $29.55 to $29.19. And then the city administrator has passed out what this looks like on the homeowners. So you will see the assessed value, you will see the value taking into consideration the homestead, you will see what the current taxes are based upon the 2867 tax rate. And if we don't get the additional revenue sharing, that's the 2955 rate. And then the second to the last column is assuming the additional revenue sharing at the 2919. So if you're looking at a home that's valued at $100,000, if we do not get additional revenue sharing, it's a $72.51 increase. If we do get revenue sharing, it's going to be a $42.85 tax rate increase.
That's per year.
That's per year.
So on the bill, we get our bills twice a year.
You get your, the amount on there is an annual amount, and it's split between two payments.
Okay. So it'd be 7251 divided in half.
Correct.
That was-
Yeah.
okay.
So on page, I think it's 4,
Yep,
you get the, at the bottom, the total tax rate, the 52 cents. That is including the 16 cents from the school department.
that's correct.
And that is with the additional revenue sharing.
With additional revenue.
That's all in, okay,
The 5.5%.
Correct.
2.5%.
Well,
The
additional
5%
Yes, yes,
incremental.
yes.
Yes. And it includes all the adjustments on the first 2 pages.
Okay.
Okay. So the only other thing I would like to highlight is actually on the last page of the packet. So you might recall our discussion on Thursday had the fund balance dropping below that 10% kind of sweet spot everybody has been looking at. And we did discuss Thursday that we could defer the tax implementation software. So if you look down below there, you will see that 165,000 moved over to the deferred column. And then all of the accounts or the adjustments that were italicized, that reflects the adjustments from the operating budget moved back into the fund balance. So now we are at a 10.04% coverage, again, in our fund balance.
Just couldn't find that other 400s, could you?
No, I like it above. Believe me, if I could round up, I would go that way.
I knew you could do it.
So we decided last time that we would not go below the 10.
That has been kind of the council's, I call it the sweet spot, but that's kind of the target, because the floor is 8% and the ceiling is 12%.
Right.
So that's kind of right down the middle. That's something that the rating agency feels is a good compromise with, investing in one-time operation things. So if something happens and we don't have the funding to do this in the future, it doesn't impact our fund balance because of our fund balance policy and what we use those monies for. But at least at this point, it's a good target middle that, council's been comfortable with in the past with it. I'm comfortable with it. I think the city administrator's comfortable with it, and the rating agency is comfortable with it. So that's like
10%.
The 10%.
8% would make people nervous.
8%, I would not necessarily be in favor of. It would be a council directive to get me to do that.
A lot of M&Ms.
And it would take more than M&Ms on that one.
Counselor Light.
Yes, and I also, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, the Finance Committee is also recommending a 10% floor as
Okay,
well.
good.
So-
Yeah, I was just going to make that comment, that it was there last year. I was reviewing it today, and it's there again. I may have made a suggestion to the chair to reword it just a little bit, but it's still there, and the number's 10.
Okay, good.
So I know that there are some folks from the school, oh, sorry, I thought that was your question, go ahead.
No, there's actually two things. I was just wondering, at this point, at this juncture, street maintenance, is that coming out of fund balance?
That's the bond issue.
It's a bond issue.
It's a bond
I'll
issue.
have something more to say later then.
Yeah.
Done.
You're all set? Okay. So I know that there are some folks from the school department and committee here, so I think we should move to the school budget discussion first, and then we can come back to ours if that works for folks. So I don't know if you guys want to, we've got Chairperson Care and the Superintendent Bill Webster, if you guys want to come sit, come closer.
Wrap yourself around this banner.
Bullshit for the shot.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. So I don't know if you guys want to do like an overview, or you want us to just kind of launch into questions?
So we did have the presentation and discussion last week, and I think Chair Carey may have some other thoughts. I do think that this is an opportunity for us to answer any further questions that the council may have, and ultimately to leave here, we hope, knowing what the council will support, at least a majority, because time is short, and if we need to do some gyrations, we need to get right on that.
So I know there were some folks that had questions or comments last week that I didn't allow you to ask or make because the representation from the school committee wasn't here at the time. So, Counselor Bean?
Yeah, I had I guess, a couple of questions. I'm looking for the school budget now, I'm not finding it, so I probably didn't bring it with me, but, we had, on the school budget, I think, a position for assistant principal for the new school, Connors. And why is?
Excuse me, Counselor.
Yes.
There's no new administrative position for Connors.
Oh,
There is a new proposed administrative position, assistant principal. They'll be located at Longley for the alternative high school programs that we intend to locate there.
okay. And that assistant principal position could not be filled with, we're closing 2 schools, so I'm thinking that there might be 2 assistant principal positions open that could fill that position. Or do
So-
we have to have a whole new person?
Yeah, so that school will open with at least 700 students. And in our 700 student model, like Montel, for example, we do have 2 assistants and a principal. We don't think that, given that population, that it would be wise to reduce the administrative presence in that building. Because we're basically combining Longley, which has a principal and an assistant, and Martell,
Yes,
which used to have a principal. We've reduced that to assistant. So we've already had the savings and made that change. But
so we
for-
need,
for a school of 700, and even the state guidelines that don't give consideration to what level of student challenges and student population exists, suggests an administrator for every 250 students.
but we had a principal at Martell, a principal and assistant principal at Longley. And so that's 3 people.
Correct.
And so at Connors, we would need a principal, assistant, and an assistant principal.
Correct, yes.
That's 2 people.
No,
What are
no.
we doing with the 3rd person?
The Longley Alternative School.
Well, no, the Connors will have
That's-
3 administrators, a principal and 2 assistants.
Okay,
And this year, we have 2 at Longley and 1 at Martell. So those 3 positions
Okay.
will be part of Connors.
okay, and because, okay, I understand
Okay,
that now.
okay.
Can I ask you what the assistant principals do? Are they required to go to special ed IEPs?
So they will attend some of the IEPs.
Yes,
Their biggest responsibility is probably in regard to student behavior and discipline. And then they also share the capacity in terms of classroom visits and assisting teachers and evaluating teachers.
are they required to be, are we required to have an assistant principal at the IEPs?
No, we are required to have someone that has administrative authority. So it could be the principal, it could be the assistant principal, it could be a special ed supervisor.
Okay. That's what I needed to know,
Okay.
because a few years ago, and quite a few years ago in the 1990s, when I was on the school committee, the school was using, interpreted the law as saying that because we needed to have an administrator who was able to disperse the funds, that we needed to have an assistant principal. And they hired enough assistant principals to be at every IEP, and you can imagine, that's like a principal who does that all day long at some of the schools. And so then I realized, no, they were not interpreting it correctly, and I'm really glad it has been changed, and I wanted to ask about it today, so, because it can be just the special ed director who's been given the authority to disperse the funds.
Correct.
Correct, and we're doing that now.
Yes.
Good,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Counselor Marcotte?
Looking at that list, and again, looking at the $110,000 for the assistant principal at Longley, what is the base pay for an assistant principal?
So it's covered under a collective bargaining agreement, and I may be off by a few thousand, but I want to say that the pay goes from 85 to 95,000, something like that, and then benefits on top of that. So if it's someone with family coverage, I think that's what is in that number. If someone took less than family coverage, it'd be less than that.
Okay, so built into this number would be $15,000 to $25,000 worth of benefits.
Correct.
100% healthcare,
80%.
80%?
Yeah.
Okay, because I know that I had agreed at the joint meeting for this position based on security concerns at the Longley School, but there was a bit of a sticker shock when I saw $110,000.
Can you just, can you just list what is part of the benefits package? So it's in health insurance, dental insurance?
So health insurance is the biggest
Yep.
part of
Cost driver.
our benefit, and per contract, the schools pay 80%, the employee pays 20%.
Yep.
Also part of that would be the Medicare charge, and also Main State Retirement.
Okay. Other questions or comments? So if there are no other questions or comments, I think that Mr. Webster and Mr. Kerr are looking for us to give them some direction on whether or not we're in support of the budget presented to us, or whether we're looking for them to make some adjustments. And if we are looking for them to make some adjustments, what the price tag of those adjustments might be. So, does anyone want to jump? Counselor Lyson?
Thank you. I thought we had talked about maybe requesting that 25% of the officer position that I think we've included, right? That we were, that was one thing that came up under
I think
discussion.
that was one of the things that we voted on, right?
We voted to.
Whether we wanted to keep it in our, partially in our budget or not.
Yes, the 25% remains in our budget, yes.
But because we did the straw poll on it, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
I guess I have a question on
Counselor Bean.
on the budget. And it's I just don't know what figures we're using. So the figures that we were given, these figures from Ms. Barrett, were we using the, do these figures reflect the, I don't know.
They
how to
reflect
ask
the
the
16
question.
cents for the school budget.
16 cents school budget that we had decided that we could support, or that, okay, so that reflects the school budget, the county budget, the city budget, reflects everything, and it's at 16%, which is where,
16
uh,
cents.
what,
16 cents.
16 cents. And that's the one, was that the highest one, or we had a low, medium, and high?
It was
And I'm sorry, I
between
don't
the
have
medium
budget
and the
in front
high.
of me. What?
It was between the medium and the high.
It was higher than the median, but lower than the high.
Yep.
But the budget adopted by the school committee wasn't either medium or high. They split the difference and picked some from both.
Okay,
So,
and that was acceptable to, or no, we don't
well,
have
so
that?
correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason why I think you came to that was because based upon that conversation that we had at the high school, there were some of us who said we were in favor of a higher than, so the low was minimum required local share, the medium was keeping it stable, and the high was above
2%.
what it had been last year, correct?
Correct.
And I think some of us gave an indication that we were willing to go above what it had been the previous
It's
budget.
above local share.
Yes, local share, I mean, my recollection is that nobody was like, we want you to cut back to local share, because that was a drastic
Yeah.
cut. So just so that we're all on the same page, the budget that we're talking about for the school committee is a 16-cent increase over what it was previously. Counselor Marcotte?
Another way to look at the options A, B, and C. Option A was less than $10.68 on local share because of the additional funding that the state was providing us. So keeping it in option B at the same $10.68 on the local taxpayer, there were additional positions being funded to get there. And then option C included additional items on top of that, which translated to the 16 cents. Looking at the estimated general fund sheet in a handout tonight, I notice that towards the bottom of the page where the percentages,
Can you say which page?
Yes, I see what you're
Page
going to
3.
say, the percentage, yep.
the percentage is not there for school.
Yes,
Page
yes.
4, I think. I think it's page 4.
3 and 4, probably.
No, 1, 2. Oh, okay, yeah, it's 3. 3.
It's a 1.5% increase.
Where is that to be placed? The page 3?
And 4.
And for, be the same percentage on both tax rate summary sheets.
So under school expenses, is that where we are?
Yep,
If you go all the way down under the proposed tax rate increase,
Oh, yeah.
It's 1.5?
Where it says 0%,
yep.
that should be 1.5.
Correct.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Counselor Pettingill?
I know I was one that said I'd be in favor of spending more, as long as it's spent correctly. I think, again, we've hit that point that it's not. Counselor Beam asked some fantastic questions about, administrative bodies in the schools and stuff like that. Takes up so much money, or so much of our money to have administrators, and we're not putting teachers in classrooms where kids, where those bodies need to be. I can't support spending more if we're not going to do more with that money. Folks in the community are starting to really question where this is all going. They're not particularly excited about spending more money again for it. I know the big sticking point for me, the last time everybody was here, Councilor Lewiston asked a fantastic question about the 5% fluctuation in the graduation rates from 2017, I think it was, then, or maybe 2016 to 2018. Yeah, so 2016 to 17 went up 5%, and then it decreased 5%. And the answer was changes in Augusta. I don't see how that happens. 5% is a large number. So I know for me, if we're not going to put the money back into the classrooms, I don't like it. It doesn't work for Lewiston.
If I could just respond to some of the things that you mentioned. The bulk of the additional $315,000 that was added by the school committee does directly impact students. It includes 3 guidance counselors, school counselors, 3 classroom teachers, an educational technician. I think it would be safe to say that student behaviors are one of our biggest challenges in schools and are escalating. And I think that any poll of teachers would be close to 100% that we need these administrators so that they can do their job. Because when a student is acting up in the classroom, when the student is having a meltdown and needs that support, it only happens through administration, unless the teacher is going to take time away from the other students. So I think that I would argue, I think the school committee would argue that all the positions on that list are there to support students in the best way we think. And we continue to have among, if not the lowest, percentage costs of administrators to statewide averages in other districts. I think we do a pretty good job. I realize that it's not something that is necessarily an easy sell, but I do think that we're very prudent, and our teachers need the support to do their jobs.
And so I don't want to repeat everything you said, but I really did want to say exactly that. We are putting most of that money back into the classrooms exactly where you had asked for it. And we are one of the districts that has the lowest cost for administrators. In fact, it's to the point now that our administrators are barely administrating. I mean, they're dealing with disciplinary issues in their office most of the day versus out there leading the school. And that's just one of the major struggles that I think we face.
Counselor, I'm sorry, yeah.
Respond,
Go ahead.
actually. So one thing with that, behaviors are challenging. I think it's really linked to the increase of technology use. But I challenge you in the sense that if we're combating the same problem the same way and we're getting the same result, we need to drastically come up with a different solution. I know that if the response to a student having a emotional outburst is to empty the classroom, things have changed for some weird way that the student having the emotional outburst is allowed to stay in the classroom, and we're now interrupting other students' learning to take those other students out.
That's a requirement of state law, unfortunately.
But it doesn't make sense.
It does. Well, can I put my 2 cents in?
No, well,
No? Okay.
anyway, but students having outbursts and things like that, we're not changing the methodology of the instruction. It's all very oral. We've taken away a lot of hands-on learning. Any hands-on learning now happens at a keyboard. There's no interactivity. So if we're combating it the same way and the only solution is to add more administrators, it's not working. We're just compounding the problem and we're throwing money away with little success.
But we do have alternative programs that we're working on to do exactly what you're saying, especially, and it slips my mind, at the middle school,
Oh, expeditionary learning.
expeditionary
Yeah.
learning, which is really proven to be successful. Every day we hear from parents how excited their kids are to be there. And that alone is such a dramatic difference for that middle school, because 2 years ago, we weren't hearing those comments from parents or students. And I agree with you that it may not be the right way, but if it's mandated by state law, we can advocate in Augusta, but I'm not sure how else we could fix that in reference to this budget.
Yeah, I know it's not a fix for this right here, but that impacts more students than it actually helps. It's a common sense thing. I know we're not going to fix it today. I know we're not going to fix it tomorrow. And I'm not even looking at this through the lens of everything that I suggested last night, because we're not, again, going to address any of that with this budget or maybe even next year's budget. But for me, there's a lot of numbers that don't add up, even going based on the EPS suggestions. Because, as I said last year, it dictates how many librarians we need to have in a school based on how many students. If it's not an ebook, kids aren't really reading them. But that's me. So, but thank you.
Thank you.
Counselor Beam?
I agree with everything you said, except for the questioning the practice of taking the whole classroom out. I don't think that happens unless the child who is having a problem is at the point where there will have to be hands-on to get that child out of the classroom. And I think I think it's a good idea to avoid that. And it's easier to just take the other children out of the room until that child can be calmed down, and I think that's the idea behind that, because hauling somebody.
I'm not disagreeing, I just
hands-on-
don't know.
I mean, I'm just trying to explain it, I think it makes sense. But I agree with you about taking people at the highest pay level and using them for something that perhaps an extra counselor could do, rather than an extra administrator. If you have administrators sitting in their office with 2 or 3 kids because they're not behaving, I'm wondering if we're being penny wise and pound foolish in a sense. Maybe we need to look at using ed techs who've been trained to work with maybe a counselor, but trying, because as Counselor
So
Pettengill
if I
said-
may address that point that you mentioned?
Yeah.
Because we have multiple resources that are dealing with the increased incident of student behavioral issues. Under Maine law, only an administrator can suspend, whether it be in-school or out-of-school suspension, or refer a situation to the superintendent that could lead to a disciplinary hearing before the school committee. We have added social workers, we've added the social school counselors. We have teachers designed to provide those interventions, whether it be behavioral or academic. But increasingly in our schools, the numbers are escalating. I do think it's a reflection of the times, unfortunately, and also perhaps our population. I think we are looking at different things. We have, in addition to expeditionary learning, we've got LRTC is now doing some of our middle school programming, that hands-on thing that we're looking at. We've added STEM teachers in all the elementary schools, much more hands-on. And the model, particularly below the high school level, is increasingly what we call the workshop model, where students are working collaboratively in smaller groups. It's not just the lecture and do as the teacher says. Students need to take and are taking more ownership of the learning. I think our most traditional approach remains at the high school, and we haven't yet implemented restorative practices there in terms of dealing with students, but we're starting to do that. We also have a poverty initiative, which I think the incident of poverty in our schools is higher today than certainly in my 8.5 years here. I don't know how it compared to 20 years ago, but our students are so needy and they're not ready for learning. And we look forward to working with the Choice Neighborhood grant committees that are working on some of these things that are going to benefit our whole city. So there are no easy answers, but I do think that we're headed in the right direction.
Thank you.
Counselor Marcotte?
When it was brought up about how many classroom teachers, I was taking a look at the option C, which was 319,000. I do see the 3 positions. One of the questions I have is a couple of these were adjusted from 60 to 50 at one point. Is $50,000 enough for a classroom teacher?
So
including
for
benefits?
someone coming out of school, that is enough.
That is enough.
It may not hire the 20-year veteran, not at that
Yeah,
level.
I understand that. I was just thinking, when you take the benefits out of that, the hourly rate is, and of course I'm dividing that by 2,040 hours, but it's not down there on the scale. And my concern is, in order to get to the 319, there are some budget items that were reduced to get there that may not be recurring. And going forward, labor costs go up every year, healthcare costs go up every year. So we're burdening next year and the out years almost immediately. That's a concern. 1.5%, now that I have my number, is not a major concern. but considering that the state has funded us more than past years, that number would have been different if the state had not to get to the same place. And at some point, we could be in that position, and we would have to pick up the tab here locally for some of these costs that we're building in now. School resource officer, maybe I missed the conversation earlier. 60,000, is that 3/4 of a position at the school
Correct.
side? Okay.
Yes.
So, yeah, I'm not comfortable with the 15, 16 cents at this point. I don't have any specific ideas, and I'd leave that to you, as far as how to get that number down, but I'm thinking the number does need to shrink.
So can I ask you what number you would be comfortable with? Because we have to give them a place to get to.
Simply percentage or raw dollars? What does the dollars represent on the 1.5?
So the,
I think Heather can,
the 1.5 is the 16 cents, which equates approximately to the 315,000.
No. 16 cents.
16 cents is the increase in the tax levy.
So if, am I hearing a sense from the council that you want to cut in this budget?
well, I think we can take a straw poll in a minute when Heather gets back to us with the,
I'm sorry, Counselor Marcotte, what were you looking for?
The actual dollars on the 16 cents, is it like 17,000 or 20,000 for every penny?
16 times 19,000.
Yeah.
16 times 19,800.
Yeah, the 316,800 that they increased the budget by.
I guess I'd be comfortable with a little less than half of that, maybe $110,000 to use a specific number.
so 8 cents?
So about 8 cents.
So before we get into that, why don't we do a straw poll on who's comfortable with where we are at the 16 cents? Does that make sense? Okay. See what I did there? All right, so for folks who are comfortable with the 16 cents.
Can I make a statement real
Yes,
quick?
yeah, sure.
I'm less concerned with the increase than how it's being spent.
We don't
I-
get to tell them what.
No, and I understand that. I don't, if I raise my hand for everything for the straw poll, I just don't want it to be confusing.
All right, so straw, did you want? Counselor Litchfield?
Just a comment. I realize that all these positions are extremely important. The one, in other words, when we went to the school committee meeting, I basically left there feeling that there would possibly be a 0% increase based on the positions that you had showed us. And then after that, when you came back, it was 16 cents. If you've been following the city council, the last couple of meetings, we've kept numerous positions that were asked for. We even halved them, so they started half a year to save some money. I guess what bothers me is the 16 cents, actually the increase comes out on the city side when you come down to it, because we have to raise the taxes. So I'm kind of uncomfortable with it. I know exactly where you're coming from. I know the importance of the people and the suggestions that you're making. If I'd have to, I would vote for the 16 cents reluctantly. I would rather look at something coming back with maybe 8 cents, and then I would even hit the city to see what a reduction of 8 cents would be on our side. I'm looking out for the taxpayers as well, but I also know that they have to realize if we don't have a good school system, we're not gonna benefit from the school system, we're not gonna move forward. And we just can't stay stagnant, so that's where I am. A
So,
predicament.
again, I can't speak for the school committee, but I understand the challenge that the council faces. So let me throw out this one possibility. Not built in our budget, but we are hopeful that it will happen, will be another $113,000 in state funding. If we built that in the budget and reduced,
Can you just say where that would come from?
it would be in an additional state subsidy.
And is that from the
That was
the
the,
undercounting of the EPS or
this is on the error that was made in
the
the.
ELLs?
Right.
Okay, great.
If we don't get it this year, we'll get it next year. We could potentially build it in a budget and reduce the local tax commitment by $113,000. And that would reduce the tax rate from 1084 to 1078. So that would be a 6 cents reduction. And then if we don't get that money, the school committee will have some decisions to make about how we will make up that shortfall. I'd like to think that that would be viewed as a good faith effort to allow us to move forward, but knowing that there's still uncertainty about whether we would get that or not.
And so I'll just add this, just in kind of in response to Councilor Joy, just, know every single budget meeting we had, we thought about the taxpayers too. And I just think we have such a long history of flat funding in this community. At some point, that catches up to you. And, so, everything you said is absolutely correct, and there was no school committee, well, most of the school committee members really, truly looked for areas that we could reduce this budget in a way that wouldn't directly impact students. And I can assure you, if we, through our guidance, there are many more positions that we should be adding to this budget that are not added. But thank you for your comments.
And I guess the one thing I just want to piggyback on, which is what you just said, chair care, which sounds weird, but
Kinda
is that, I sat on the school committee for, a couple of years. I know how difficult that budget is. I know that when you're talking about administrators, that what you're saying is absolutely true. I also know that I sat with you on this council, and I know that you really had the backs of the taxpayers. And so I feel comfortable with the 16-cent increase, knowing that you have been through this budget, and trust your judgment and your thought to the taxpayer first and foremost. So, Councilor Lyson.
Yeah, so it's hard, like I agree with both of you, but I have a different outcome, so I do think that we're at a position both in the school and cities that we need to invest. And that's to make up for shortfalls, in my opinion. So, but I also like your offer on the table, because I guess I'm just a little bit more optimistic than most. I think we've got more revenue sharing coming down the pike. I think we've got more education funding coming down the pike. So I think there's such great potential there that now's the time to take a bit of a risk. So we're not cutting back those services, but we're also, at the same time, making a commitment to the taxpayers that we're not going to go above a certain point, especially if we know additional revenues are coming. And I know we've, even with our revenue sharing or other sources of revenue, we have to look at, the Finance Committee as well. We have to look at reducing the tax rate, not necessarily using that money for other things. So I appreciate that kind of a commitment, and that's what I would like to see, because that supports the 16% going forth, but reducing it, and then if not, then we'll get back to that point, and there'd have to be some hard negotiations with the school committee to say, okay, it didn't happen, what can we sacrifice at this time. But I think the 16 cents is reasonable, and I like that offer and approach that can assure the taxpayers that we're not going to go any more than that. So, thank you.
Councilor LaJoy.
I'll agree with Councilor Lyson. I appreciate what you stated and the possibility available to us. So I feel somewhat more comfortable in moving forward.
So that would be 1078, which is a 10-cent increase, correct?
Yep.
Councilor Bean.
You know, I also support doing that. I feel we need to have, support our schools, because it does, sounds contradictory, but it keeps us at, it keeps all the positions open, it keeps everything that we were going to get on the 16-cent budget there. Am I correct?
Yes.
Assuming we get
So
it,
we're
yes.
still
Yes, assuming we
supporting
get
the
it.
schools at the 16%. And if we want to.
16 cents, I just want to,
16
I want to
cents.
make sure that the public hears 16 cents and not
Sorry.
16%.
There's so many-
I know.
It's so hard to
Yes.
keep up with it. But if we want to have people moving into Lewiston who are going to support the tax base, and we want young people with children to want to move into Lewiston, and that's one of the first things that they look at, I believe, unless they're being forced to move by a company, is what are the schools like? And we want our schools to have a good reputation, and that's why I really want to support that 16-cent level of education rather than just the flat funding, but it's really hard also to think about our seniors trying to absorb another tax increase. Some of them are having trouble paying their taxes now, and they're already in, it's not easy to move to a less expensive house or to move to an apartment or whatever. And so I think this plan that we have, that you suggested, and that Councilor Lyson was supporting, and Councilor LaJoy, is a good one. And I do believe we're going to have more money coming down, and more support for the schools in the future. And that, as you said, this is, it's because we've had to cut back so much all along. We've never had what we really need to have to do the best job we can with our, I mean, we are doing the best job we can. We're doing a great job, and everybody's working so hard to support the schools. And I think, anyway, I think it's a good idea to go with that plan and see what happens.
Councilor Marcotte?
Well, I'll have to be contrary, because I'm not sure that I like the plan. The plan is, if something happens, pie in the sky, and if it doesn't happen, we're strapped with filling that gap, not only for the current year,
No.
but in the
They're
future.
going to go back and cut that 113 if they don't get the 113. That was the plan.
Explain cutting something after funding all these positions.
So, we would not fill all the positions until we knew that additional money was forthcoming, and I would be working with my staff post haste to identify and propose to the school committee how we would make up that deficit if indeed the funding were not forthcoming. So the intent would be that we would have a balanced budget, that if we didn't get the funding from the state, we would reduce expenditures by $113,000.
But those positions are in the warrants.
We can amend the warrant, because you're going to have to re-vote anyway if we adjust the budget, so we could have that warrant revised and be ready for the council next week.
I would prefer going the other avenue and finding the positions at this point that you could live with not being in the 2020 budget. But to address another item before I rest here, flat funding is not always used in the right context. And when I hear flat funding, I'm thinking no increases year over year or several years. I have something before me that maybe go 1 year beyond what was presented to the council recently. Our mill rate for the school was $9.54 in 2015. The ask at 10.68, which is what was keyed in at the time, and it's actually being requested at 10.84 currently, would have been 11.9% increase. That's a pretty good clip over the course of 4 or 5 years, depending on how you're counting. I don't think the general public is seeing that in this community. When you take a look at the median income in Lewiston, whether it's median family or median household per capita, it's not a good number, and it hasn't been a good number for twice as long as this chart. So I'm not looking to just put something in place so that it comes back and bites us a year from now or 2 years from now, because this little spike in the economy may be an anomaly. And I just don't want to bank on things in the future that may or may not be there. I don't know if some of the recent comments were with CMP in mind, but that's not even a done deal. Our fellow legislators in Portland are looking to take that away from us. So I'd rather be conservative at this point, and keep things in perspective, and if the revenue flow comes later, that's when we loosen the belts, but not right now.
Okay, so let's do a straw poll. Who's in favor of the 78 cents with the caveat that you'll amend the warrant articles before you come back to us? So it would be a 10% increase based upon.
A 10-cent.
Yes, 10 cents. Oh my God, I just did my own thing.
It's hard to do.
10 cents, 10-cent increase.
A little less than 1%.
Yes. So all those who would be in favor of that? So 1, 2, so there's 4 of us. Can't tell you where Counselor Ray is, but you can ask her yourself. And then I don't know if Counselor Pettingill or Counselor Marcotte have anything they want to add.
Like I said, I'm not necessarily opposed to the amount of the increase. I think we should invest in it. I think investing in our students is the right way to go. I don't like how it's being spent. Talking with people, I know they're in agreement. So for me, that's not a 16 cents thing. It's not a 10-cent thing. I think banking on the 10-cent thing is a bad idea. You know, and I would much rather have that money and then spend it than spend it before we have it. So
We're not spending it before we have it.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Counselor Lyson?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of address.
Sorry, were you done?
yeah, I mean it's one of those things where we're falling on the it's for the betterment of the students argument that anybody that says nay is automatically in the minority, even if for no other reason that they're just saying, spend the money more wisely. And I get that we can't tell them how to spend the money. You know, flipping through here, justification for a nurse at $60,000 is to have it be a 1-to-1 ratio, which I'm sure ties back to the EPS model.
No, there's no nurse there at 60,000. We're only paying for a month of a nurse just to help get the
That's
student
not the
body settled.
updated
No?
one.
Okay, so, you know.
4,000 is what we had in there for
Okay.
1 month. having two.
You know, but again, if I had time to dive into it, I'm sure I could find other instances that are, you know, linked to the EPS model. You know, one comment that I had here is we're sitting here, you know, the public schools' main objective above all else is to teach students, get students to learn. And I think we've gotten away from that with all the poverty, you know, initiatives and everything like that. And I fully understand how kids coming to school hungry impacts that. But at what point do we go back to teaching students and placing a high emphasis on teaching students? I think we've gotten away from that.
Well, we get to that point when the community stops sending children to our schools that are suffering from severe trauma and being hungry and not sleeping at night for, 7, 8 hours. Our schools are a product of what the community is sending us.
Yep.
And we're doing everything we can, and you mentioned you would support this budget if it was going into teachers, and we've shown you that it is going into teachers. You shared that, you struggle with an administrative position, but we didn't ask for a principal, we asked for an assistant principal to handle an alternative education. We've shown you that Lewiston is well below what the state average is for administrators. So I think we truly have responded to some of your major concerns, obviously not all, Councilor Pettingill. But that didn't change any of your positions at this point, so I'm not sure what else we could do. We heard you loud and clear when you spoke at the joint meeting, and I think we tried to respond to your concerns. We gave you an audience with Bobby, and she definitely heard your thoughts and advocated for some of those things. So.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Counselor Lyson? Oh. Do you?
So
Yes, I did have something I want to
I
address.
thought you did.
Yeah, thank you. That's right. Are you done?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm back there. Thank you. My optimism about the future, was not just totally set. I wasn't even thinking about the CMP project. It was really expected revenue sharing increases that I think are going to be coming along the pike, as well as some additional resources that the governor has promised schools. And both of those, I think, are things that we can look forward in the future. I'm not saying we spend those now, but I do think we can be optimistic and do the kind of investment both on the school and city side that's necessary to really, I think, deliver the services, be they education or public works or fire or police, that our residents deserve and I think need as well. So, and that's a changing need, and I know it's a struggle when you look at populations, but again, I'm optimistic in that future that, we're going to be sending less children who have trauma issues if we reduce trauma in the community, and I think that's the point of what you're doing, talking about. Are we bringing health care? Are we bringing education? Are we bringing services? Do we have decent, safe, affordable housing? Do we have people eating good nutritional meals and things like that? That's going to go a long ways to deal with a lot of the issues that people suffer from, be they students or our elders or the general population. So again, I look at it as an investment and with, I think, a better picture financially down the road for our communities. And, some of the percentage of cuts in staffing that we've experienced in this city are just, to me, need to be righted. We need to turn the ship and say, hey, we need to provide services. People are, potentially burning out. People, again, are not getting the services they need, be they road constructions or other things, because of our budgetary limitations. And I think we need to stay strong and say, hey, this is a gamble toward our future, but what else do we have to do? You know, I mean, I just think it makes sense, so thank you.
Counselor Bean?
What is that money that we're waiting for? The ELL
So,
money?
there was an error made in the initial
What?
funding
Oh, the-
estimate from the state, and that it's going to be corrected. The issue is whether we're going to get it for FY '20 or FY '21. It was $113,000. And if, my understanding is if the governor's proposed budget is adopted, we'll get it, but there may be adjustments through the legislative process, so we won't know until the final budget is adopted, somewhere between now and June 30.
So last year, we didn't get, or this year, we didn't get $113,000 that we were
No, it was
supposed to get?
in the inputs that went into determining next year's
Oh,
subsidy.
the input of
Yes.
determining.
Yes,
Okay, and so they may say we have to wait an extra year to
Correct.
get it. But we will get it sometime.
we will get it, yes, that's correct.
Eventually, so I think it's not a horrible gamble to take.
But if we don't get it this year, we'll make the cuts this year, so.
We'll have to make the cuts. And if we do, never mind. I'm trying to think of anything that would keep us at 16, but I can't. I'm in a bitter mind.
So, Mayor Cloutier, as I understand it, well, it's certainly not unanimous, but that it appears that the council would support a 1078 budget, and I'll work with the city administrator and finance director to incorporate that. We're going to quickly amend tomorrow night's school committee meeting agenda to include those budget adjustments. And I'll be in touch with the city staff to give you the material you need. In a minute, I guess it really can wait until well, at this point, you're scheduled to act on it on May 7th, but certainly long before then, we'll have that to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome back.
Yes.
Welcome home.
So I've been scribbling over there. If the school department cuts the 6 cents,
That brings us to,
that brings us, without revenue sharing, to a total tax rate of $29.49, which would be a $67.57 increase on a $100,000 home. With the additional revenue sharing, $29.13, or a $37.90 tax rate increase. Overall percentage increase on the first one is 2.86. On the second one would be 1.6% increase.
1.6, which is a
1 point,
school and city together.
everything all in,
Okay,
It's the 2913.
yes.
correct.
And what's the cent increase?
46. Give or take a penny. I haven't done my penny things yet.
And 10 cents of that is school and 36 cents is city.
32 is city and
32 is
4 is
city.
county.
Right, okay, yes, forget about that. Forget about us. So 32 city, 10 school, and 4 county.
Correct,
Subject to minor rounding changes.
correct.
It's actually 5.7 cents on the school.
questions or comments?
I just want to make sure, excuse me. I'm
Of course.
sorry. I just want to make sure I understand. So, the assessed value on a $100,000 house was 23, FY 19, 2362, and FY 20 was 2434.
But Counselor Bean, those numbers have changed with,
Yes,
with the 10-cent drop.
with the 10-cent drop, it's going to be
6 cents.
I'm sorry, the 6 cents drop to the
right,
10 cents.
Down to 10. What would that be, the 24?
The 2434.92 would become 2429.98,
Okay, 2429.98.
or a $67.57 increase.
And we don't have that $60 here anywhere. The change was,
The change was $67.57.
where?
So
where-
the $72.51 becomes $67.57.
I want to be able to explain this to people if people
The
ask me.
2405.26 becomes 24,000 even 31 cents.
For
and the-
2431.
2400.31. And the 4285 becomes 3790.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I just want, there's so many different numbers in different places. I want to be sure I know what we're doing.
Councilor Marcotte?
So we're still discussing both budget and bonding, or just the budget?
That's up to you. At this point, I was kind of focusing on the budget
On the
since we're
budget, yeah.
adopting that first.
And probably negligible impact, but the bonding would affect the budget in some fashion, right, and debt service?
What is included in the debt service and for all of the utilities is the interest rate only for selling the FY 19 LCIP.
So there's really no impact.
And it's all
in
included already in the budget.
So I'll save discussion on the bonding for later. But as far as the budget's concerned, a couple of workshops ago, we had some straw polls that my understanding is that it necessitated 5 votes to make it to the next workshop. That's what we were told at the beginning of the meeting, that we were only addressing those items that got 5 votes.
Are we talking about the positions?
Positions,
Yeah.
The positions.
Yes?
Today, I went through the videotapes of both April 11th and April 18th. One of the items that was brought forward to April 18th was only 4 votes,
Which one was that then?
the assistant fire chief.
Okay.
It may have gained a vote on 418, but other items lost votes on 418. And if we're going to approve items based on a different set of rules, even though nothing got 4 votes specifically on 418, I might be inclined to change a vote on something, to give it 4 votes, and to be included based on 4 votes. Because this whole idea of 5 votes is simply based on, you need 5 votes to override the ordinance for the overall budget. You don't necessarily need that on each individual item.
No, that's correct.
But based on sensibilities, that's why I understood the 5 votes. I had the same question that Councilor Lyson had at the last meeting. I kind of balked at the moment, but he brought it up, and it, went on deaf ears, and we moved on, but it obviously stuck with me, and I did my research. So, if we're going to allow the assistant fire chief to move forward, I may want to revisit other positions as well.
So based upon the straw poll, and I made a missed hands, I had it as 4. So we can recalculate everything. And what other positions would you like to take into consideration?
I just heard something different. You just said that you calculated it at 4?
I had it when we were doing the straw polls.
The original
loosely.
one,
The original one, when I was writing down hands, I had that as 4, when I was kind of looking up and counting and going through all
But
of
we
those.
were told at the next meeting that only those that received 5 was getting consideration at that work.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, yep.
so I'm happy to rehold the straw polls when Counselor Ray is back on all the positions, if that's what people want to do. I mean,
But I think, okay, I know what he's saying.
Yeah,
Yep.
just so everybody else knows, go back to that.
so what else, so can you tell us what the number of votes were for each one?
That's what I was gonna say.
Because if, like, other things only got 4,
Do we want to go through all of them?
Go through the whole list, yep.
Okay, so the assistant fire chief.
and this is the first meeting.
Well, I'm-
The first time we did the straw poll. The
Yes,
first straw
Yes.
poll we did, yes, okay.
yes. So are we doing another straw poll?
No, I
No,
just wanted
just
to make sure we were talking,
report the
because
vote.
Okay,
we've
I
done
had-
2 so far. I just wanted to make sure we're talking.
I
about
had 4 for the assistant fire chief, 4 for the planner, I'm sorry, 5 for the planner, 7 for the city clerk, 5 for the city accountant, or senior accountant, 6 for the 2 police officers, 6 for the school resource officer, 7 for the fire inspector, 1 for the highway worker, 0 for the equipment servicer, 5 for one of the equipment mechanics, 0 for the recreation programmer, 1 for the program aide, and 0 from the library tech. I want to see something before I say this out loud.
So I just want to, I feel like there was some, like,
So I think the ones we came back to were the ones that had 4 votes or more.
yes, that's what I think too.
Right.
So it may have been that Heather misspoke at the
Yeah,
second meeting.
I think so, because I'm looking at the
But
list.
for the folks, for the planner did come back the
It
second
did
time,
come
and
back
we
the
voted on
second
it the
time.
second time.
It was line 43 on the second time, then we did another straw poll. And the second straw poll was 6 for the city clerks, 6 for the fire inspector, 1 for the first, or 7 for the first patrol officer, 3 for the second patrol officer, 5 for the school resource officer, 6 for the senior accountant, 6 for the mechanic, 5 for the assistant fire chief, and 3 for the planner. That was the second straw poll, which is what the, and then we adjusted the start dates to the 1/1 start dates, which is what the packet for tonight was based upon.
So if everything that got 4 votes that first time came back the second time,
That's what I'm looking at one more time, just to make sure.
then there shouldn't be any question.
Yeah, because there was
about
only
where we
one
are
that
now,
got 4
'cause
votes,
it's
and that
still
was,
the same thing.
Yep.
and that was the fire chief, the assistant fire chief,
Right, so everything that got 4 votes or more
Came
came
back
back the second time.
instead of 5.
Yes.
But those weren't the rules we were playing with that night, no, when we were voting.
So then we can absolutely redo it. I just said that at our next meeting.
And I
There's
did
no way
have
to go
some,
back in time and
and I
change the way
did
that
have
that
some
happened.
discrepancies, with, you went too fast on the 418, so I may have a mistake, and then I just lost my place. But on 411, the fire inspector got 6, not 7. And then I got confused with 1 or 2 positions between the fire
Hands up.
inspector and the mechanic. Was there 1 position or 2 positions in there?
There was 2 position mechanics to start with,
Right.
and then it went down to 1.
and it was somewhat confusing on the tape as well. But the mechanic I have down as 5, and that's what you said. Fire inspector was 6, I have 6, you said 7. And in between, I saw only 1 vote on the tape, highway worker, which had 1 vote.
Right, and the equipment servicer had 0.
Okay, I don't recall an actual vote, but 0 is fine. Equipment servicer. And of course, that didn't get carried over anyway. On the 418, since the sequence is a little bit different to begin with, but I used the sequence from 411. Assistant Fire Chief, 5, Planner, 3, City Clerk, 6, Senior Accountant, 6, increasing 1 Patrol Officer, 7, 2, 3, and I think that's where I got a little confused. Resource Officer, I had 5, did you state 6?
No, I had 5 as
5.
well.
Okay, I may have been looking at Fire Inspector. Fire Inspector, 6.
Yep,
So I was looking at the other line when you said that. And Mechanic, 6,
yep,
and everything else wasn't brought forward.
correct.
But I'll also reiterate that, something I said 2 meetings ago, and that is, before we start adding administration, we should be looking at a time management study of some of these positions. I think we would find that there may be more need for a planner than an assistant fire chief at this time.
So what do people want to do?
I think we need to, Mr. Ray.
Yeah, so come back on Thursday. She's not here Thursday, so it'll have to be
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
And redo the straw poll from the beginning.
I mean, it's a critical.
I'm fine, I'm totally fine with
And we're
that.
at the end of the process.
Yes.
You guys, so,
Yeah.
I mean,
So I do want to say, though, I think we do, and feel free to agree or disagree, we do the straw poll on Thursday, one time.
Tuesday.
Yes, sorry, Tuesday, one time. And it's a include it or don't include it. There's no there's no counting of, I
And
mean, there's a
can we
counting of
keep our
hands in
hands
that,
up?
yes, yes.
That's the problem that,
Or actually, maybe we say yay or nay, so that there's actually vocal,
that would be great.
okay. Does that work for folks?
not a roll call, or, I mean, I chose.
It's not a
to-
roll call because we don't
a
vote on
workshop.
individual budgets, and it's a workshop.
Yeah, last time I chose to keep my head down because I didn't want to be influenced or influence anybody else as I voted.
I mean,
So I
I'm
don't-
voting how I vote, so,
Yeah, so that was, but I think, I mean, I'll just share, I mean, I said I felt the planner was a position was a non-starter for me if we don't go that way. We had it in the budget, so we had 5 votes the first time through, all of a sudden it's now 3 votes.
I didn't vote for it the second time through, I'll tell you that.
So just to make that case, talking to Doug Green yesterday, I mean, he's, as the planner, as the
Can you use your mic, sorry?
I'm sorry. As a former planning director, I mean, we had a staff of, I was the planning director, we had a planning coordinator, planning assistant, and administrative aide. So we had 4 staff. I mean, really Doug's the only planner. And with all due respect to David, I mean, he's doing some of the stuff and higher level stuff, but Doug, I know, is getting burned out. I just don't want to burn out a planner because he doesn't have enough staff. And to me, that's critical, especially if you're trying to look forward to what we're going to do. We've got a comprehensive plan to get in place. We've got other ordinance changes about design, and we've got lots of things to do in the planning world that will help us move forward. Obviously, I'm a little biased being a planner myself, but I know that it can make a difference, and I know you can also save money with in-house staff. I mean, we did our comprehensive plan in-house, back in '98. Certainly not as good a comprehensive plan as was produced here, but we did it, with the existing resources and some grant money from the state. So I do think that in the long run, it will save us money, but also move us forward in a very, very important direction. Planners got to be anticipatory, they got to be out ahead of the game to a certain extent, if they're doing their jobs well, and I think our comp plan does that pretty well, and now we need to implement it, so that's my case for the planning position. And I felt that was what was lacking a little bit, some of that discourse. I didn't have an opportunity to do that, and all of a sudden 3 votes were lost and the planner position was lost. You know what I mean? Or two votes from the initial.
So I don't disagree with anything you just said. I will say, I think you made a pretty good case throughout this budget process consistently. I also, think that on that list of positions we got, that everything on there was important, and that there were, at some, we can't afford to fund all of them. And so for me, the planner position fell into one of those things where I felt like I would much prefer to have a patrol officer, based upon the things that I'm hearing from folks in my ward. So again, I think that, we all have we're all hearing different things from different constituents, and we need to respond to that in the way that feels most appropriate to us, so.
And again, I mean, you could say what your favorite positions are, and I could differ, or I can
For me,
agree.
getting rental registration up and off the
Absolutely.
ground is
You
absolutely
know,
a priority.
both Mike and I are dedicated to that, and we're part of that committee, so that's important. But I think, as I made the case earlier, the planner position could play a role in that as well, and I think that's important. And anyway, don't get me wrong, the list of positions and the cases that have been made are pretty compelling. And again, I think we know how much we want to spend, maximum, but we're like the school committee, where we're going to cut, but we're going to do it now. So in any case, straw poll next Tuesday, right? I'm very excited about it,
So, Councilor Marquardt.
First, I want to know, how many votes is it going to take to put the position in next Tuesday?
We're not going to have, we're going to say it's,
Well, the straw poll,
whatever it takes to get to the budget, correct?
It is up to the council to
I mean,
decide
what does it take to
what
pass a
number.
budget? 5?
It will take 5 votes to approve the budget.
and now how many votes to put an item in the budget?
I think 5.
You could say 5, or you could suggest 4 would work, and the notion being that just because
I mean, for
Majority-
me,
well,
but let me just say, to approve the budget,
yes.
I have to be comfortable with what that increase is. So if say, six of the positions get 5 votes, and that gets us to a 70-cent increase, that gets us back up to a 70-cent increase, I'm not voting for that budget.
The point I was going to make is that may be something the council ought to decide, because there may be situations where a position only gets 4 votes, but that once the budget's put together as a whole, the rest of the group might decide to support it anyway. Comes up to you folks. Are you gonna, set a this far and no farther line, or are you gonna have some potential movement there based on the fact that a majority would like to see a position, even if it's not 5?
I mean, I am comfortable at the 32 cents.
It's not just about the increase or where the cuts are coming from. It's about, are we properly positioning our services? And I think it's been stated before, but I would prefer the planner than the assistant fire chief. And that may be my deal breaker. That's why I'm asking about 4 or 5. I'm going to ask something during the bond discussion as well, which will probably increase the amount being bonded. But if the council cares whether I vote for 120% number on the bond or not, that may make a difference on that. There are priorities. And as far as I'm concerned, my priority, when we were discussing this on 411 and 418, was the planner had more priority, but I was willing to vote against it on both occasions. But when I learned that the assistant fire chief had moved forward. I says, I'm not willing to just overlook that as a mistake.
So I'm interested in how we go back and fix that for you.
I just need to know whether it's going to be 4 or 5 votes that put something in the budget.
And that, to me, is a decision you folks need to make to tell us.
And I can't tell you what, I can't tell you how that's going to break out in terms of what the tax increase is. You know, like, so if we get.
1 penny for every $19,000.
If we get so then I want a breakout of how each of those positions going together is going to get me to that point. Because if you take, you know, each one of those positions has a different salary level, correct?
Correct.
So if I say I want a 32-cent increase, you could put together those positions in about 150 different ways to get to that point, based upon whether you get 5 votes or 4 votes for something. So I feel like we can come back and do a straw poll on Tuesday, and based upon that, figure out what the tax increase is, but then we're still gonna have to come back again and figure out whether people are comfortable with what that tax increase is.
That's correct.
And if they're not, then we have to come back and figure out what we're gonna cut from that point on.
That's correct. It becomes, in that scenario, a two-step process. The fact that anybody votes to put something in the budget doesn't necessarily mean that they will then support the entire budget. As 2 separate issues. So you could vote to put all of those positions in, and then only 4 people are going to support the budget, then you're going to have to negotiate down from that point.
Like I've been told before, because someone was predisposing where I was going, and it wasn't on the council, it was another body, but to advocate for things, and once it's in there, to simply vote against it, can appear quite disingenuous, especially if you don't make it clear as to what happened, and then to deviate at that point. I would prefer at this point, because of the way the discussion's going, and because we already did it on April 11th, 4 votes puts the item in the budget, and then we vote on the budget.
I'm happy to say that it's 4 votes. So if we want to say 4 votes adds it back into the budget, I then want Heather to come back and tell me what that increase is.
And
And then we
easy
can
enough to do.
figure out from there what the next step is going to be. Whether we need to cut something or whether we don't.
Is the rest of the council in favor of 4 votes?
I'm not going to answer your question necessarily, but one of the confusing aspects of this process, and don't get me wrong, I mean, we're making it up as we go to a certain extent, but it makes sense and we agree to it, is that when that first straw poll was gained, all of the positions were put in full year salaries or whatever. We were comparing, apples to apples. And when the vote went forward, when I saw the planner got 5 positions and the assistant fire chief did not, got 4, I assumed that would not be included, only the 5 votes would go forward, right? Because that was the only one that got 4 votes. But they were also, I mean, when you're eliminating the assistant fire chief, it was also the most expensive position by far. Now we're talking about 61,000, but it was really, full year was 121. I think the planner was like 69. That was relatively expensive compared to some of the other positions as well. So, but now we're looking at, different start dates, which, impact the budget a little bit differently, at least within this fiscal year, right? So it's kind of not, it's not apples to apples any longer, it's apples to oranges.
Then you might want to suggest a start date for the planner, which would put it on the same footing the next time around.
Do we not have that at this point? I thought we had start dates.
So
for all
when
of them.
we did the last straw poll, where the planner got 3 positions, that was based upon the planner starting at October 1st, and the assistant fire chief was starting on October 1st.
But is now starting later.
Under this iteration,
Save money.
yes. So at that point in time, when we did that second straw poll, both of them were starting October 1st.
And what was the financial impact of the planner at that October 1st start date?
$69,815,
Okay. I remembered that number.
yes.
But it's, again, and what was the assistant fire chief?
It was 92,519.
So, I mean, I'm looking there saying, if we cut this and this, we're dropping the overall by 30,000 if we're adding the planner instead of the fire chief, was the way I was thinking. And as the 5 votes carried forward, I knew we would be decreasing the amount of impact financially if I replaced one with the other, you know what I mean? And I expected that fully to be happening, and all of a sudden we took another straw poll, and something that got 5 votes all of a sudden got 3, and something that got 4 votes got 5.
So Jim,
Yeah.
sorry, Counselor Lyson, what do you need the start dates to be for you to be comfortable voting on Tuesday? Because I'm not leaving here tonight until we're clear on what we're gonna be doing on Tuesday, so that we're not back in the same place again.
Well, there was also some negotiations with department heads who felt that they could live with that situation, start dates.
Right, which
So-
I thought was also the case that, exactly what happened with the planner.
Correct.
Dave got up and gave us a date for the start.
Mhm.
Dave and I did talk about that, yes.
Can I go to Counselor Marcotte and come back to you?
You may not get any better answer, but yeah, go ahead, do that.
Counselor
Thank you.
Marcotte.
I'm not so concerned with the start date. I'm looking at an original budget item of $123,358 for the assistant fire chief, and another $41,476 for a vehicle, for a total of $164,800, let's call it $165,000. That was a huge number, and that's why I didn't support it in the beginning. At that time, the planner was listed at $93,000. That was still a huge number, and I didn't want to support it at that time. And then we went through various, I don't even know what word to use there, but gyrations.
Negotiations,
Gyrations. We went through various gyrations, and it became very complicated, and I wasn't expecting the outcomes that occurred on 4/18. And looking back at that, no matter what the start date is on either of these positions for fiscal year '20, they're going to be fully expensed in the following fiscal year, and that's my major concern, and that's why I don't support the assistant fire chief, and I'd be more inclined to support the planner. A planner hopefully would provide a return on our investment in a fashion where we can improve businesses that locate here and certain other efficiencies in order to drive our revenue. We need to be looking at our revenue. And that's why initially I wouldn't support a planner, but if we're going to support an assistant fire chief, I'm going to support a planner. That's what it's going to come down to. And that's a double whammy, I understand. That's a huge impact on the budget. But that's where I'm going to go because of my passion on which position ought to be funded over the other position.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Why do you have to vote in favor of either of them? If you're so against both of them,
Because I see it as though if people are voting for a position based on other biases and not really looking at what is the effectiveness of one position or another, that's why I've asked twice now, and I'll make it twice tonight for 3 times, we need a time management study. Should be one done in the fire department, one done in planning, maybe a few other places as well. But since we're discussing those 2 positions, that's where I would start. And maybe the result of that study would come back and prove my point. At least that's what I'd hope for. And if it didn't prove my point, then I'm wrong, and I'd change my opinion. But that's where I'm at.
so I guess from my point of view, if you're asking for a study of both of those departments, you would vote against both of those positions. It doesn't make sense to me, if you think that there needs to be a study in both departments, why you would vote in favor of a position in one but not in the other one.
You're questioning my thinking process?
I am, actually, I am.
I mean, like.
I'm trying to understand.
Earlier,
I'm
we
trying to
heard-
understand your thinking
Earlier, we
process.
heard somebody challenge a counselor from Ward 2, which I thought was totally inappropriate, not to get into debate.
We're talking about our budget right now, and I'm trying to understand your position.
I just told you, if we're going to budget a position for $165,000 that I don't believe is necessary, I am going to darn well support a position that has more value than the other position. Why just do a pass on the planner? No, because I want to get that number down, but the rest of us are not cooperating in getting that number down with a position that's viewed as not necessary. I don't know how much more planner you want me to get on that.
I'm not questioning your lack of support for the fire chief's position. I'm totally fine with that. What I'm saying is I just can't understand if you think that there needs to be a study in two departments.
Then why don't we pass on both and wait for the study and revisit them next year?
That's a perfectly logical request to make. I'm just not, my lack of understanding comes from whether or not you support a position in a department that you're saying needs a study. And so, again, I'm just asking for clarity on that issue. I'm not debating with you about whether or not you should support that. I mean, that's your prerogative, not mine.
Then why are you asking?
Because I am trying to get clarity on the issue.
It's about as clear as I can make it.
Okay, great.
So do you want to go
Counselor
to Mr. Light, or Counselor
Did you-
Lyson, I think?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor
You had asked what we need for next
Yes.
week. So I was thinking about that. I think that, obviously, we've set a ceiling, right, that we don't want to go over, right, that we talked about earlier. Is
Well,
that true?
that's the fund balance that we talked about.
No, not fund balance, just even the mill rate.
I don't think that's been,
We haven't
No.
determined
Okay.
that.
I think some
Well-
individuals have set that in their own mind,
So
but I don't think the group has set it.
I'm the kind of person who's assuming that we're going to be getting additional the revenue sharing, and that would bring us to 2913 with 1.6%. I thought, to me, that was the ceiling. Or if we don't include the fund balance, that's 2949 and 2.86. I think those are the numbers that you gave.
Those are the numbers that we're at right at the moment with what's been presented.
So that's where I'm at as a ceiling, and at least a working ceiling. Now, what we need to do is, if we say that it doesn't matter if there's 4 votes or 5 votes, okay, it's like we go into the Chinese restaurant, we've got this, we can make these selections, but we can't get over the budget. Do you know what I mean? So I think we need to have a good battery in your calculator or whatever, because I think that we're going to be doing a lot of that quickly, and maybe you can do some of the pre-math, and you know how much each of these positions is going to affect the budget, right?
Yep.
Okay, so then the other piece is, I think, I agree with Councilor Marcotte, we really have to look back to the entire cost of the position on a year-to-year basis, because that's what we're going to have to do going forward. So I just want that, not necessarily the impact of the budget, but that at least a consistency, either, so we're matching up job against job, not necessarily in cost, not necessarily, well, when can we start, how late can we start
So
these
you
jobs?
want full year totals for each of the positions? Okay. So scrap the start dates that we came up with.
Because that's what we're going to have to live with down the road. And
So I think you need two sets of numbers. One, I think you need to scrap for the straw poll, scrap the numbers, scrap the start dates, and go back to full year figures, correct? So that we know what we're getting into for the future.
Yep.
But then I think at the end of the day, when it comes back to what we're talking about for a tax increase on this year, then we want to add in, once the straw poll is done and we've decided what we want to include based upon the full
Right.
charges, then I think when we talk about creating the tax rate for this year, we want to go back to what those start dates
Yeah,
are
and-
and adjust the salary accordingly.
If that works, that's fine, and if we have to winnow one position or whatever, maybe that will have to come to a vote too.
Councilor Wardrobe?
I let everybody speak, and I'm just as passionate for the assistant chief as Councilor Lyson is about the planner. Councilor Lyson lived with the planner. He understands what he did, he understands the value, he understands the time commitment. I have to say I did the same thing for 12 years as chief, and I found that my positions were dropped due to budget decreases, which impacted the load on the chief, the assistant chief, and the two deputies at the time. There was 3 of them. And as another deputy left, that increased the load as well. Some of the information the current chief has given us has to do with fire prevention and overseeing that particular area, which I think is extremely important with regards as to the projects that we've put forward, and the apartment building inspections and so on. I'll go along with just about everything the council acts on. However, I'm still strong-minded to the fact that the fire department, in the management aspect, whether it's an assistant chief, a deputy chief, or just a person that's up there, to help the 2 individuals that are out there accommodate and complete the necessary work available. The other thing is, when I was on as well, and we had the deputy chiefs, we used to exchange the vehicle amongst each other, and therefore, I would ask the chief, if a vehicle is absolutely necessary, where the vehicle they currently have now could be exchanged from the current assistant chief and the deputy chief. That would be $45,000 less.
The vehicle's nowhere right now. The vehicle's nowhere right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Just so everybody knows, vehicle's not in here right now. There is a chief's vehicle, an assistant chief's vehicle, and a third vehicle that was the captain's vehicle, right? That we still have. We were looking at, and help me out here, Heather, looking at that vehicle.
Brian would be the one
We're
to,
looking at that third vehicle to be for the new fire inspector. I don't see any reason why with 2 administrative chiefs, whatever you want to call them, that they couldn't share the 2 other vehicles.
But just going back to that, so there's no vehicle in the budget for the position that we're
Correct.
talking about?
no, in the
So that was a
budget, in
misstatement.
fund balance, anything. Right now, there's no vehicle.
it's in the LCIP, is it?
Nope,
Nope.
nowhere.
Nowhere?
Correct.
For the assistant chief?
Just
He-
made.
We had cut that out so we could have, currently in this budget year, we're purchasing another command vehicle. So we would have the command vehicle we're currently using as a reserve or backup, which in turn would be folded into the system, so we wouldn't need another vehicle for
So
an
the
assistant chief.
vehicle that we have currently in the budget is not absolutely for the assistant chief.
I don't believe we have a vehicle in the budget at all.
I just want to make that clear. The vehicle that we're looking at today is for the inspector to be able to complete his task. Am I correct? Is that what you're saying?
No, there's no vehicle in the budget.
I don't believe there's a vehicle in the budget at all for anything, for
there's
any
not a-
position.
Exactly. There's police vehicles, there's the cruisers, there are SUVs for fund balance. There's office equipment, public safety equipment, household, all of that. There was a vehicle requested as a new program and service, but that was not funded anywhere.
Okay.
Fund balance, budget, right now, it is not included anywhere.
Okay. So there's no vehicle whatsoever that goes with that basic salary, which is a salaried position
Correct,
as well.
correct.
Okay. And in my opinion, there is a necessity to have that position there. However, I'm willing to talk with the chief, to see if anything can be worked out. But I really feel that somehow there should be some relief for those two individuals. Because over a period of time, and I've been out 13 years now, and my former assistant chief, who was also chief, has been out 2 years. So we're talking 15 years, that for a period of time, we worked with only the assistant chief and myself. And it was quite difficult to try to manage all the departments at the same time. So that's where my commitment at this time is. Is it subject to change? I suppose it is. However, at this time, that's where I'm at.
So Tuesday,
So
what are we
Tuesday-
looking at? Can you
Tues-
just kind of restate what you heard from us in
Okay.
terms of what you're coming back with?
My understanding, first of all, other than the positions, which I know is a big,
I think that's it. I think we're all
everybody's
good on
else
everything
is
else.
okay with everything else, correct? Is that a relatively fair statement right now?
Semi-safe at least?
Semi-safe.
And just to confirm, there's no vehicle in the budget anywhere for fire, period.
Correct.
Thank you.
So we will go down the new positions list again as if no straw polls were taken at all. We will state their annual salary. We will do a yay or nay, and then the council can decide which ones, based upon the summary of the yay or nays, gets actually included in the budget.
Do we want to go back to all of the rid positions, even the ones that, we want to stick with the positions we talked about, that we actually took the first,
Right.
the
No,
most
I think
recent,
we-
that
yeah,
that
we
are
start
on
with
the
the-
current list?
I think we'll
Plus
start with the
planner.
original list. I think for transparency's sake, we're going back to the beginning.
I think
I'm
it's,
sorry, but
some of those got 0 votes, I think,
Well-
just confuses the issue, but that's okay, we'll do it your way.
Just to muddy the waters a
Yeah,
little more.
thank you.
please do.
If one person votes for all of the positions, that kind of defeats our purposes. And I
Well,
guess that's why we were saying.
I mean, I guess what I want to say is that I think that you did that the first time around, and I
Yeah.
think that was fine. If we're going back to the beginning, and that's the way,
But that might, maybe, I don't know if people would be willing to say, how many, we want to reduce it by 3 positions, is it, or 2 positions? You can only vote for 5 positions, or,
I don't
Four
think we can do
positions.
that, because I think it ends up then coming back to what that total amount of money is, right?
As I said before, in my opinion, it's a 2-step process. The first step is to decide which positions you would like to fund.
I mean,
You
if people
see,
are
then you-
comfortable leaving positions out, I'm fine with that. I was trying to be like the most
Yeah.
transparent redo of the process as we could be.
2-step process. First is, which positions would you like to see funded? And some of you may want to vote for all of them. Then the next question becomes, what tax rate are you willing to live with? And at that point, if you've exceeded that tax rate, you're going to have to go back and start chopping somehow. Now, there are a couple ways you can do it. Obviously, the straw poll way is one. I suspect some people may vote for more positions than other people will. Another alternative, and I almost hate to bring this up, so you can shoot me now, is for each of you to take that entire list and rank order them. Top priority, bottom priority. Then we can take a look at that and come up with a composite rating that puts them all in order, and you can debate that. Doesn't mean that's automatically the final choice. You may go down that list and say, yeah, but I really want to swap this, and you have that argument. But that's another option. Just now shoot me for bringing up another option. I apologize.
I like the rank order.
The problem with the ranked order is that everybody should be able to see people's ranked order, because otherwise we're ending up in a situation again where people are like, well, how many people actually voted for this position? Well, how many people voted for that position, not believing what the numbers are? So I'm not sure how we do that in a transparent way.
We can give you a sheet to do it on. You can send it in. We can publish it in the agenda for next Tuesday if you get it here by Thursday.
Counselor LaJoy. LaJoie.
Sorry I started this, but I put the school committee, I guess, or the school department in a particular position to look for cost savings measures, and they came up with suggestions, so, and I guess that's what led us to this point, where we have to find cost savings measures. If we allow all these positions to go through, Heather or Ed, where can we cut in the regular budget to make up for all those positions? I just want,
That would be a council directive.
okay, so that would be extremely difficult just as well. One way or another, we have to make
We-
drastic decisions.
Correct.
Yeah, you know, if you look through what Heather's already presented, that's probably third or fourth time through, because we did an awful lot of line item reductions
We
just
did.
before you even saw the budget. Could we find another few $1,000s? Probably. I mean, the one thing we've talked about is each month we delay the bond issue, we save a little bit. But it's not going to get you where you would necessarily like to go. You get to the point where if you want this position, you got to find another position you don't want.
I guess that's what
And that
I'm
gets
leading up to. We're in that particular area where the factors are going to make a difference. So I guess this, other than going into the general budget itself and trying to cut from there.
Heather's playing with some numbers.
Funding all the, is that right? 47, yeah. Hang on, let me try it one more.
That seems too big.
Yeah,
Don't use all your battery up.
it's a solar one.
You'll need that on Tuesday.
That's what I'm afraid of.
Turn the lights up.
She cried so hard.
Thank you, Jolene, for waking me up.
No.
47 cents?
Oh, was that 47 cents to fund all
Yeah,
the
fund
positions?
all the positions at 100%, July 1st. No extra fire vehicle.
You know what?
Extra fire vehicle.
So it's
Just the
47
positions.
cents on top of the 32 we were already at.
No,
No, because that includes
that's-
some of the positions already.
Right, so
It's probably another
just the
25,
positions themselves. So if I could,
a little less than 25 cents.
so I mean, I guess what we can do is the next iteration, I put all the positions back in with all the cuts up to this point, and you guys can decide, and then we can do the straw poll and just take them out one at a time and see how it impacts
So
the
start with
tax.
the number, figure out if we're comfortable with
Put
that
them all
number.
in,
And then start
everyone
take the
says
ones
no.
with the lowest votes out, right?
as long as we're in agreement,
Yeah.
that's how we're gonna do it, then that's fine. That way, all the other cuts are in there.
Can, sorry, okay, so so do we want to tonight have Heather tell us what the positions are that got 0 votes and leave those off the table altogether?
It sounds to me, and I may just be speculating on this, it sounds to me that the city clerk's position should be in there, the fire inspector's position, the patrol officer, the resource officer, the senior accountant, the mechanic, the assistant fire chief, and then add back the planning, and then take the straw poll. Would that be satisfactory?
I would like to know how many votes the second patrol officer got.
Okay, the first one, I think there were 6. Three.
The first time it got 3?
No, the
No.
first time it got 6. The second iteration, it got 3.
And the one patrol officer got 6.
The one
No, the
patrol
first
officer.
time, they both got 6?
Yes,
So I
Yes.
want that added back in then, too.
okay.
Maybe easier to start over.
Well,
I
that's
mean,
what I'm,
So that's what I'm saying. Can you tell us the ones that got 0, and then we can decide
I
if we
would
want to
think,
include those?
I would think we would eliminate the
I mean,
equipment servicer.
Dale told us he didn't need one of those people, so,
He'd rather,
And then just-
With that though, the second time you voted was with the adjusted start dates. But it, you know, to Jim's
but the first time, if it got 0 votes.
So I would say,
That's where, this thing is so convoluted.
So just add them all back. Okay,
I-
just add them all back.
Yeah, I mean,
it
it's,
won't take us long.
I'm fine with that.
okay,
I don't want to,
Can I ask
but
a
I don't
question?
I agree.
want to
I
untangle
agree.
this.
Can I ask a question? You said that if we added all of these positions, we had to take away a fire truck. Is that?
No.
We never had the fire truck. The fire truck was never on the table.
No, I'm not talking about that same fire truck.
yes.
no.
What did you say we?
The fire vehicle, the extra vehicle that was part of the new program and service, but
That we
not
didn't-
a
that we
fire
did
truck.
not fund.
Absolutely not a fire
Okay,
truck.
the fire vehicle then, if we took the fire vehicle out, we could.
No, the fire
Already
vehicle's
out.
out.
It's
It's
out.
never been in.
Already out. It's long gone.
Okay, so, okay.
Got left behind a month ago.
I'm ready to leave.
So I will put them all in, and we'll go one by each.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, just one, everything else has a start date. We did not put any start dates in for these others. I don't anticipate doing that, or do you want us to put start?
No,
'cause
so
we're-
here's
What
what
if
we
we do
said.
both?
We're gonna have two
Yes.
systems.
Yes, yes.
You're gonna have the vote system, and then you're gonna have the budget system. The position, vote for the position, and then you have the position with how much it's going to cost for the part year. So you have the full cost, partial cost. We now have a set of positions we're gonna put back on the list that we only will have full cost for because we have not considered whether we would phase those positions in.
We're going to come here on Tuesday. Heather's going to have the list of positions with a full year salary that goes with those positions. Actually, if you could have that as a handout for us, that would be helpful.
I would do that.
Okay. I would say if you could have on that handout the full year impact, and then the impact for what we talked about for this year with the start dates.
But to
But we
the
have-
city administrator's point, there's a handful of positions that were on that list because they didn't gain enough votes.
Right.
We
Don't have
didn't
a start
even
date.
consider prorating their start date. So for example,
Yeah, I know.
the
what you're
library
saying.
technician does not have an adjusted start date. The program aide doesn't have enough. The recreation programmer, the second equipment mechanic doesn't. The equipment servicer and the highway worker. Those are the ones that we kind of have eliminated up to this point.
I mean, is there objection to move to eliminate those positions from the further straw poll
Well, I mean,
consideration?
that was the conversation that Counselor
No, I
Pettengill
mean,
and I
I'm
just said was that,
Hearing
you know, in
those-
order to try and untangle this, we kind of have to go back to the beginning.
Well, I think we can make this step, because I don't think any of those were competitive, unless I'm wrong with some.
The only thing I heard, and ask you this, is Counselor, the mayor requested that the second patrol officer be added in. We can certainly do that. Is there any of the other positions that weren't voted on the second time that anyone would like to see added back on the list?
So can we go through the positions and what their like rating was in that first meeting?
Yes.
So tell us the ones that had 0.
0 was the library technician, the recreation programmer, the equipment servicer.
Does anybody want to add those back in for Tuesday for consideration?
No.
Okay. Okay, all those who do not want to add those back in, say no. So Counselor Lyson,
No.
Counselor Pettengill,
No, sorry.
No.
no. Okay, so you can keep those off the list.
Okay. What about the ones that got one vote?
I think we keep those on.
Not necessarily, let's.
Oh, right, who are they?
Highway worker and the program aide.
So I feel like I feel like Counselor Ray deserves to be here to say whether or not she wants them to be back on there, because maybe she was that one vote.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I think-
Well, Jolene, you voted for all
Well,
of them.
that's, yes, okay, I'm sorry, you're making a good point.
I don't want to, but I think
I
to
think if she
end-
were here, it would be different.
to end all the debate, just start at the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, it's a convoluted story, but when I set up home theater systems, I had to go service them and realized that sound wasn't coming out. Versus trying to chase wires and figure out what the issue was, scrap it and reset it up. And it worked every single time. Because there's too many variables.
It's very millennial.
And we will be here, it's 8:01 right now. I don't know if we'd finish this conversation before Tuesday, or, Wednesday.
I think you're right.
At this rate.
Let's just go back to the beginning.
Okay.
Is everyone okay with that? Okay.
Should we vote on it?
No, everyone's nodding their head.
I did.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was nodding off, I wasn't voting.
Oh, that was falling asleep. Okay, so back to the beginning.
Okay.
Isn't there a song or something?
I'll bring my laptop.
I think Counselor Marcotte might want to have some comment on the capital.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kathy, it looks like.
No, I just wanted to get clarification. We have a workshop already scheduled for Thursday. I'm understanding that we're canceling that. I just
We're
want absolute
canceling that.
confirmation. We'll take it off the website, we'll revoke the agenda and all that. Perfect, thank you.
We could continue this conversation.
Nope. Tuesday it is. And you have,
First, I'd like to ask what just happened. No, the meeting Thursday is canceled?
yes,
Okay.
because Counselor Ray won't be here anyway, so we can't really do anything more than we're doing tonight.
Road maintenance. Not sure what page that's on in the LCIP.
Okay, so right now,
CIP. I got it.
I can't find it.
Yeah, go ahead. You know.
It's only like 2 or 3 pages. Landscape fashion. 65. 60, I think it's 65.
Yep.
Yep.
I've had some concern in the past with how roads or streets get selected for maintenance, especially when the PCI code is actually lower for certain streets that didn't make it and didn't make it in the following years, or a couple of years out, as the example that I'll point to tonight. And having a conversation with the Director of Public Works before the meeting, my understanding is that an LCIP 2020 could be streets that are actually worked on this year with a completion in the spring of 2020, correct? So all of the streets that are listed in the 2020 section would be done presumably by July or June 30th of next year. 2 years later, there's a couple of streets, 2022, Clearwater and Constance. Constance is at a rating of 40, which is at least one that's being done currently in the current fiscal year, or at least it's being proposed in the LCIP. Clearwater is listed as a 25, which means it's really starting to crumble. I would like to see both of those streets moved up to the 2020. I see that the projected cost is $208,000. I don't know if there's anything in 2020 that could be moved down to not see that increase or not at that level. But in any rate, with a LCIP that's coming in at 120% at this point, which I was not comfortable with supporting. And this is this discussion again that we had during the budget. It can make and break whether I support that particular item. As you remember, last year I supported the LCIP only after we removed $162,000 from a project that evidently didn't need to be funded in 2019 because we still haven't spent the money. And is coming in with a much higher cost. It's being added more than I even expected at the time. But I would like to see those two streets put into the 2020. There are elderly people that lived in that neighborhood for more than 50 years. They deserve to see their taxes put to use in their lifetime. I mean, 25 is a pretty bad road, and I think about my street at 38, and I'm not sure, page 65, and I'm not sure why that one hasn't been done yet. But
One of the things, and we can certainly share this with the council, is the complete list of all of the streets and all of their ratings, because, and certainly Dale's here and he can comment on this, for every street that's rated a 70 to 75, that's going to be dealt with in the next 5 years, there are probably at least twice, if not 3 times, that many other streets that are still in that same category. So the basic issue that we trace, I think my street is in the teens. Doesn't need to be paved. It's a short, dead-end street with 3 driveways on it. But we have an awful lot of streets out there that are rated at a level which says something should be done to them, and we just don't have enough money to deal with them all. So there's some, clearly you can make trade-offs there.
But when residents see certain streets being done in Lewiston that appear, or they sense from when they drive across it, are in better shape than their own, and this neighborhood traditionally has been a really nice neighborhood. They contribute to our tax base in a huge way and have for more than 50 years. They deserve to have these streets done. After you go from Clearwater to Constance, and I'm not remembering all the streets in the right order, but Pauline comes after that as you leave Lewiston.
Yeah.
Pauline and a couple other streets were done last year. Why these streets weren't scheduled for the very following year, I don't know. And I'm not sure where Reservoir is. That might be the very first one after Weber Ave. And that one's not even in here. So that one would be probably the one left out if we were to agree to Clearwater and Constance.
No, and I'm not disputing the thing that you say. I just say that there's probably another 20 streets out there that are in the same category.
But I'm just saying that adding this to the already overburdened CIP might carry my vote, and I say might,
Okay,
I'm not going to commit.
I suspect that the message has been received.
One thing I'd just like to comment on really briefly, I think we've talked, most of us at one point or another, on a sidebar about looking at a paving program. That is something that we're redoing this summer. That is something that we're going to look at some new ways of approaching paving. One of the things I'd like to bring to you is some strategic goals for paving, so that you know why we do what we do, and get your comment and input on it and approval for it before we restructure a paving program. So again, all this stuff was done 3, 4, 5 years ago. It's time to kind of look at it and modernize our program. And Ed is absolutely right. There are many, many streets out there. We don't have enough funds to do them all, but are there other approaches where we can maybe do some treatments on some streets like Ed's that really just need a surface treatment to them, and that's something we haven't been doing. So expect this summer to be seeing a paving strategy from Public Works and the administrator.
Councilor Bean?
And I just say yay, because I've been saying this for a few years, that the strategy we were using wasn't working, and a lot of streets were being left in terrible disrepair, and It's very complicated, but if we can look at the strategy, that would be great, because I think a lot of people wonder why their streets aren't getting done when other streets that look much nicer are being repaved. So, thank you.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? All right. See you on Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Thank you.